an all-time moment coming up at the end of this month and early next month, and that is the official induction to the Hall of Fame.
Can't wait.
One of our favorite guests, and that is Joe Thomas. What's up, Joe? How you doing, man?
Hey, what's up, guys? Thanks for having me on. Hey, how's everybody doing?
He's got the Hall of Fame glow, doesn't he, guys?
Yeah, he does. He's shiny. He is.
He's clearly working on his tan, getting ready for the induction ceremony. You're ready to go, aren't you, Joe?
Are you getting nervous as it gets closer or no?
The only thing I'm nervous about right now is all the party planning that's going on. I really had no idea how involved all these different events were going to be. And when you're inviting, 200 people from Wisconsin that are all traveling out to Canton, Ohio, you got to make sure that all their transportation and their parking and their hotels and everything's all taken care of, especially because, these people are my parents' age, my grandparents' age. And so, there's a lot of stuff that I have to do that we've been kind of fretting about and worrying about up until this moment that I really haven't had a chance to be too nervous just yet about the actual enshrinement or the speech or any of that stuff.
Do you have enough cheese lined up, Joe? Is there enough cheese for all the relatives coming to town?
Ooh, that's a good question. We bring our own cheese when we're from Wisconsin. We can't trust people to have enough cheese for us. Same thing with beer. We bring our own beer and cheese.
Okay.
You can't ever run out of that
That's
stuff.
A smart
It'd be
play.
too tragic.
Yeah. What percentage would you say your speech is completed right now? Are you in the rewrite stage? Are you in the edit stage? Where are you?
Yeah, I think I'm honestly about 100% completed. I was going through that process April, May, and the Hall of Fame's great. They give you a speechwriter to kind of help you make sure you can cut it down to the appropriate length because, as you guys know, some of these speakers were going a little bit overboard with the length of their speeches, and so the Hall of Fame has done a nice job of trying to tighten them up so they're 5 to 7 minutes. You get in, get out, say a few important points, thank the important people, and leave the stage. We don't need to thank every single youth football coach that everybody had and everybody that had any hand in this person making the NFL Hall of Fame. So I think it's good. Then it doesn't have to be competitive. You can just thank the people that are the closest and give a couple of quick points. And hopefully the crowd, I think, doesn't get bored and fall asleep, especially if it's not overly hot. If it's 90-something, you're probably going to be sweating like crazy. You're not going to fall asleep. But hey, if the weather's comfortable, and guys were going a little bit too long, you might have a few eyelids being shut out there because you got 9 inductees.
Joe, did they give you a replica backup bust? Obviously you got one in Canton. Did they give you one?
Get one for your house?
That you got at the crib where people walk through? Because here, in our community, we have every aunt or cousin or your grandmother have this room where it's furniture in there, it's white, but there's plastic on it, so you can look in there, but you can't sleep on it. Do you have a bust that you're gonna put in your house that the kids can look at, but they can't touch?
That's funny because I grew up in a house just like you guys. We had a dining room, and then we also had a formal living room, and it was literally half of our first floor, and nobody ever went in it because it was okay, Christmas dinner, and that's it. Then we can eat here, and then we'll go sit over there and have some drinks, and then that's the last time you ever get to sit in this room. And I'm like, Mom, why do you only use half your house? We smash us into these tiny kitchen and this tiny living room over here when we could use all this really nice. No, that's not the way it is. You have to have your formal dining room and your formal living room. But the Outland Trophy was cool that I won in college because they give you a replica of the Outland Trophy, so you can put on your shelving over there. I don't know if you can see it. No, it's over there. Maybe you can see it.
Joe's so good, he threw it away.
Nice.
He was
I see
there
it.
you go. I see it.
So there's the Outland.
He's got it hidden behind a bunch of stuff. That's typical Joe
Hats,
Thomas.
a few extra books that I've never read, some papers probably some bills that I owe. But that would be kind of cool because as far as I know, the only place you can go to see the bust is Canton. They don't even give replicas to the teams for them to be able to display, from what I understand, in their facility. So that's a great question. If you can start something. I don't know if it's possible. Maybe there's some rules against it, but I don't know if I would want a bust of myself in my house. However, I can imagine that the Browns, maybe in their facility or in their stadium, would maybe want to be able to have their own little hall of busts of all the Hall of Famers.
Hall of Busts.
Well, the Browns, we could have the Hall of Busts. We could have Johnny Manziel in the Hall of Busts. We could have
Justin Gilbert.
That's right.
There's been a lot of first-round picks since you, Joe, that we could put in the Hall of Busts.
It'd be a It would be a great museum. Very interesting. You'd have the Hall of Busts on one side and then the Hall of
Busts.
actual busts on the other side. And you could tell the full story of the Cleveland Browns. Outhouse and penthouse right there. Look left, look right.
Justin Gilbert.
Oh my God! Yeah, unfortunately, we'd have way too many on the bad wing than the good wing.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So, Joe, when you look back on your career, and I imagine you were doing that when you were writing your speech, and you're reflecting back on the entirety of your NFL career. And I'm not asking you to give us a preview of your speech because obviously we all want that to be a surprise. But how have you sort of summated your career in these last couple of months as you've reflected back on it?
Yeah, right in the speech, I mentioned that you kind of want to give a couple points that you feel like are important to you that you learned throughout your life or throughout your football career. And I think I learned a lot about being a team player, about teamwork and what makes teams special. Obviously not a ton of success, but I don't think that limited me from learning what makes the greatest teams the best. And I think one of the things is that nobody's contribution is any more or less important than anybody else. Like, it's impossible to say that the person that's sweeping the floors at night that nobody gets to see is less important than your starting left tackle. And when you have a true team that all works together, nobody really cares what the credit is for, who gets the credit. It's all about just buying in and doing your job and becoming that ultimate team. And I think that's one of the themes that I'm going to talk about, because as an offensive lineman, I don't score points, I don't catch passes, I don't pick up the ball unless my man got a sack fumble on the quarterback and I got to save the day and grab the ball. I don't even get tackles except if there's interceptions and bad things are happening. But I feel like as an offensive line, we have a lot of pride because we have a lot of impact in giving those other guys that do score those points opportunities throughout the game to be great, to be the person that everybody in the crowd is cheering. And I think that's one of the things that I had a chance to reflect on about my own career, about my 10 and a half years without missing a play, and kind of what that meant to me and what that says about me as a teammate to those other guys.
I love how Joe says, I was always only making a tackle and touching the ball when my guy got a sack fumble. Like that ever happened.
Yeah.
I mean, you barely gave up any
Joel's
sacks
guy.
your whole career.
Yeah, he said, okay, Joel's guy.
Yeah.
There's Joel's
you
guy.
didn't get beat that way.
I was covering for him.
Hey, I've asked a number of Hall of Famers to do this, and I've always been fascinated by the response, and hopefully you'll participate. Can you give us 3 words that describe you as a football player?
Consistent, fastidious.
Wow,
and
that's the first time I've ever heard that word in used that way.
I was going to say attention to detail, but I'm like, that's more than one word. Yeah. I did go to the Harvard of Midwest Wisconsin. However, attention to detail is still not one word. So fastidious.
Well done.
And what was the third one?
Yeah, one more.
Oh, now I forgot it. It's consistent, attention to detail, fastidious, and disciplined.
Discipline.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? You can translate those 3 words to any profession, and you're going to have a successful employee. You're going to have a winner. Those are obviously 3 characteristics that most winners have in common, and that's clear that Joe's used those attributes to ride all the way to Canton.
Joe, I wanted to get your thoughts on the current team for a minute, because there's a lot of hype for this team right now. Fans are very excited. We all know that if Deshaun Watson can play like the guy he was in Houston, that there's no limit to how good this team can be. I mean, this is probably the most talented roster top to bottom in forever that the Browns have had. Are you confident Deshaun will can still play at that Houston level? And if he does, are they good enough to compete with the Kansas City, Cincinnati Buffaloes of the AFC?
Yes, and yes, absolutely. Like, we didn't really see the true Deshaun Watson at all last season because of 2 things. Obviously, the huge layoff that he had, and being a quarterback's all about consistency and day in and day out getting those looks from the defense so you can deliver the football where it needs to be on time and on the money. And then having a rapport with your receivers and within your own offense, and kind of thinking on the same page as your offensive coordinator. And all of those things were totally out the window once Deshaun got back from his suspension, because he'd missed so much time, and not only time away from football, but time once he got to Cleveland. We were there with him in training camp, and he was looking pretty good. And I remember being there on the day the NFL came down with his extended suspension. And once that happened, me and Nathan Zegura were looking at each other like, hey, I don't know what you can make of this season, because even when he does come back, he's going to be so rusty, because the NFL game is hard. Like, the difference between the first quarterback, the best quarterback in the NFL, and the 32nd quarterback is there, but it's not like it's this chasm like you would see in high school or college football. Like, the difference between good and great in the NFL at quarterback is pretty small. It's 3 or 4 plays per game, and sometimes those plays are just not throwing the football in one spot and tucking it in, running it, and making those quick decisions that you have to make, that the only way you can be able to make them is if you're consistently getting those reps in practice and the game. So I think it's going to be a totally different Deshaun Watson this season, because he's going to be, one, not rusty from having the huge layoff, but also because he's had a lot more time working with Kevin within this offense and with these pass catchers to make sure that they're on the same page, so that they're all, preaching out of the same hymnal.
I know you haven't had a chance to watch it. I don't know if you will at some point. Your life is crazy busy. Maybe after the Hall of Fame, who knows? I know, because I wanted Mike to ask you if you'd seen this have you heard of this documentary that's on Netflix, this quarterback documentary?
I've heard of it, and I would love to watch it. Getting in the mind of a quarterback just sounds fascinating.
I know. Mike just got mad at me. He's like, I told you that Joe hadn't seen it. I know you haven't seen it.
This will be a great conversation. I've never seen it, but it sounds like fun.
The reason I bring it up is because of all the things you just pointed out. Like, it really shows you, this documentary, more than anything else, way better than Hard Knocks. For a quarterback especially, because there's so much responsibility on the quarterback, which but we didn't. Like, G played major Division I college, so he has a clue, not the NFL level, but he has more of a clue than we do. But I have no clue. I never played football at any kind of high level besides being a kid. So, you have no clue unless this, I think, is the first thing that's ever opened up. It's like, my God, the work that the quarterbacks have to go through every week. Of course Deshaun Watson wasn't going to be good after missing that time. We were foolish to think he might be.
Yeah, and really the only quarterbacks that can have success after a huge layoff like that, or when they're young in the NFL, are guys that are just winning with their athleticism. And now Deshaun's a tremendously athletic quarterback, but they want him to be a pocket passer first and then win with his legs when he has to. And so when you look at rookies and second-year quarterbacks in the NFL that have great success, it's typically because they're doing it with their legs, and then that's opening up wide open things in the secondary. But to be a guy that wins within the pocket or just within the confines and the rhythm of a normal offense, you got to have so many reps, and you got to be at tip-top shape physically and mentally to be able to quickly make those decisions. And then on top of all that, now you got to deliver the ball accurately and on time. And you have 1.5 to 2 seconds on each play to be able to do that after the ball is snapped. It's incredibly difficult. And you got to remember too, whatever you put on film this week, now the defensive coordinators next week, they're all watching that. And then now they're going to try to bait you into any tendencies that you had from the week before so that they can pick you off. And really, the difference between a good game or a not so good game at quarterback might just be 2 throws. You go from having 2 touchdowns and 280 yards passing and no interceptions. Now you get 2 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. That's a totally different ball game. And that really comes down to just making 2 decisions that were either just a little bit late or were just not the right decision in that moment. And so the difference between victory and getting your butt whipped at quarterback is unbelievably small. And that's why those guys hardly ever take any time off. You never see a quarterback leaving the building early, and they're pulling long hours even in the offseason because it's just so difficult, and there's so many things that you have to learn and be able to process at light speed.
Joe, how difficult is it for an offensive lineman? When I play defensive lineman, you can get it's different ways you look at trying to stop quarterbacks that run the ball or who are elusive, and then there's quarterbacks that present a different challenge because they just get rid of the ball so fast, and you're just like, I'm chasing a rabbit. I can't get home. These guys are 1, 2, 3 balls gone. But for the offensive lineman, when you go from Jacoby Brissett to Deshaun Watson, where now you're doing more scramble drills, Now you got a guy that extends plays, and you may be used to holding the guy or used to the ball coming out, but now you're looking around. Is it difficult to transition into a guy that moves around a little more than a strategic, just a straight drop back passer?
I think it's just a little bit more difficult because you got to have yourself a little bit more physically in good condition. Because when you've got like a Peyton Manning or a Tom Brady back there, you got 2.5 seconds. You know the ball's going to be gone. There's not going to be any chasing your guy left and right, outside the pocket, down the field. Like, he just gets back. You get in your man's way like a bump on the log for a 1.5, 2 seconds, and your quarterback's throwing the football. But now when you have a guy like Deshaun Watson, what you have to do is you're watching your defensive lineman's eyes, right? Because you're trying to see where he's looking to try to determine where that ball is right now, because you have no idea what Deshaun's doing behind you. You can kind of understand from the confines of what the play is, but when he decides to leave the pocket, now it's a matter of watching my defensive lineman's eyes. Okay, his eyes went over there. Boom, now I got to turn. Now I got to run and try to keep up and keep my body between him and the quarterback. And all of a sudden, if my guy turns and runs and his eyes are downfield, okay, I can assume that the ball got thrown. But really, it's just kind of playing off of his body language and being willing to extend the play, whereas pocket passers, you don't have to do that.
Yeah, that's incredible.
I asked that question. I didn't know I was going to get that answer because I never knew it. Like, so I never knew what that was. I'm like, you looking at eyes now? Okay.
But that's the difference. You talk about the difference between a good quarterback and a great quarterback might be 2 throws.
Yeah.
I feel like, and I'm sure you're not the only offensive lineman that learned to look at the defensive
Not
player's
everybody's
eyes.
doing that. No
but,
way.
Well, here's the thing. Even if everybody's doing that, not everybody is good enough to look the defensive player in his face and still be able to stop him.
Right.
It's multitasking at the next level, and that's the difference.
Not to mention the absurdity of the fact that defensive linemen get rotated in and out. Like, it's not like Joe's coming out every fifth play to take a breather.
He's going up against fresh legs all the time.
Right? I mean, like, even Myles Garrett, who plays more than most defensive linemen, is not playing every single play. Whereas Joe's playing every single play that the offense
literally
does.
did play every single play.
It is just crazy. We recently, this is driving me crazy. During this whole interview, I've been trying to think about who said this. But I don't even know if it was on the show. I don't know if I was talking to somebody on my podcast. I have no idea. But somebody was talking about when you were a rookie and, like, it was obvious right in the beginning that you didn't need the same learning curve as a rookie that other guys did, because you came into the league like already knowing stuff that veteran players knew. I can't remember who the hell told us that. Maybe it was, I don't know. But somebody told me that in the last week. Is that true, or is that people overhyping you now? Did you come into the league as a guy, you were not a typical rookie? I mean, it seems that way because you were great as a rookie. Is that true, though?
You must have had my mom on your podcast because she's the only person that would say such nice things about me. No, I think I had a big benefit playing at Wisconsin. We played in a pro-style offense. My offensive coordinator was Paul Christ. He'd been in the NFL a long time. He ran the Norv Turner, Don Coryell type offense. And so from a terminology standpoint, from a technique standpoint, like, there wasn't a huge learning curve. You see so many guys now that play in these versions of spread or the run and shoot type stuff that they're not doing anything the same when they get to the NFL level that they did in college. And so it's like starting back at square one. So I think I had an advantage there, but also, like I talked about at the beginning of the show, like, my attention to detail was always the one thing I thought that was my superpower over not only my other offensive linemen, but the defensive linemen, because I was going to focus on things that were smaller than anybody else on that field that most people would just think is inconsequential. But I knew maybe once every 3 games, it was going to make a big difference for me. And so that's kind of how I studied. And I think I always took the perspective that I'm not good enough. I can't do this. I'm not going to be able to figure this out. Like, I had that imposter syndrome, but I think that was good for me because it motivated me to try to strive for perfection, even though as a rookie, I was pretty good. I made the Pro Bowl, and, like, people were talking about me as an offensive lineman, as a starter in the NFL, but all I could think about was the mistakes that I made and how I could change what I was doing from a process or a preparation standpoint and become an even better offensive lineman. And that was constantly what I strove for. And I think that's why by year 10, year 11, I still felt like, other than injuries slowing me down, I was playing my best football because my brain was working a lot faster than everybody else.
Joe, we're going to play a game as we say goodbye, see how well you know your fellow Hall of Famers. But quickly, before we move on to that, I think you'd make an unbelievable general manager. Any interest at all to be a front office employee, personnel in the NFL?
That would be a lot of fun. I know personally with my wife and kids, we're kind of waiting until the kids are maybe out of the house before I would take a serious, significant full-time gig like that. But I would never say never because I love the game of football.
My goodness.
And coaching or front office work would be a dream come true. And I guess the question is, right now when the kids are at home, they're my priority. I got to be the jungle gym and the guy that gets kicked in the nuts by my son all day. But when he's gone and he's in college and I can cut up his credit cards.
So how old is your youngest, Joe?
My youngest is 4. She's
so we've got to
turning
wait
5 in
14
September.
years
So we
then.
got some time.